And we are back. It's time for Good Vibes. Debbie Cox DeNova in the house. Last week was a doozy. It was good. Flirting. A lot of you watched that one. All right. All right, we got another good topic.
Yes.
I can't wait to hear about avoiding social errors.
Avoiding social errors.
How many times have people gone home and told their girlfriend, their wife, or their husband, or their boyfriend, God, I shouldn't have said that. Mm-hmm. Open mouth, insert foot.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all making social errors. And when we talk about social errors, what we're talking about is things that are going to make us more unlikable to people. Because at the end of the day, when we're going into social interactions, we all want to be liked, right? Mm-hmm. And so this information comes from Charlie Hooper, Charisma on Command, same as the flirtation stuff. So there's some crossover here because we're talking about interacting with humans. And so what we're really leading to is how can you make yourself more likable in social situations? And the first thing, ironically, is to stop focusing on being liked or being more likable and more about having fun. You know, something people do oftentimes is they do this energy ducking thing where they come in and their energy is low because they don't want to make a bad impression or they don't want to be too intrusive. But at the end of the day, most people want to have fun and have a good time in conversations. They just don't know how to get there. Mm-hmm. So be the first person, first of all, to initiate having fun in the conversation. And the best way to do this is to ask interesting questions that people want to answer. And also to set a tone that's a little bit higher in decibel than the other person. So if we start here, right? Mm-hmm. Hi, my name is Debbie, right? Like we're probably going to go downhill from there. So if you notice that the interaction has started there, you can actually do a pattern interrupt and actually introduce a little more of a playful tone. It will change the direction and it will make you more memorable and more likable.
Yeah, but don't walk in the room and go, "Hey, I'm Debbie."
You can if that's your personality, right?
Wow.
Some people have that personality where they bring the energy into the room. Yeah. And so if that feels authentic to you, then definitely do that. But some people are flipping furniture. They're doing what they need to do, right? But the point of it is that ironically, if you are actually focused too much on being likable, you'll actually oftentimes cross the authentic boundary for yourself. So oftentimes you'll pretend, for example, are you hungry, Martin? Oh, no, I'm not that hungry, right? And you're trying not to be a bother. But ironically, it makes you less likable, and people can sense whenever you are being inauthentic to yourself in order to be liked.
Really, I'm starving.
Right. So this is think about this in a social situation. You're at a party, right? You're talking to somebody, and it's really not that interesting. So you're kind of looking around the room to see who else is
You've
there.
You've been following me?
Here's the thing to remember, though, is that when you start scanning the room, other people are looking at you in their peripheral as well, and you're actually making both you and the person you're talking to look boring because them for not being interesting enough to capture your attention, but you as well for not being able to increase the energy factor or make it more interesting where you actually are. So remember that when you're in conversation in a group, that the most interesting point should be at the center of you and whoever you're talking to, okay? So that means that it becomes incumbent upon you to ask interesting questions. One error is asking boring questions. So, Martin, where are you from, right? All the questions that we all hear all the time. And then on the opposite end of it is giving short answers like, oh, I'm from Houma. So you're not giving the other person anything to latch onto. Remember that people in social interactions, they want to connect to the dots. They want to increase the likelihood that you're going to get along. So when you ask a question, for example, about so what's the most interesting thing that you have found, or what's the weirdest thing, the experience that you've had as a station owner in all of your career? When you ask somebody a question that actually gets them to think outside of the box that they don't answer all the time, it actually increases the likability between you and that person, but it also makes them engaged and want to answer the question more. Now,
I would say, when somebody asks me what's the weirdest question
there
ever
you
asked.
go, you see? Win-win. So then having an interesting answer back is something, right? So being able to say, well, I'm from Houma. and actually give them more points to which they can actually connect to you. My whole entire family lives on, and you tell them exactly where your family lives and all of that, where they can connect to God. Oh, I used to live down there, right? And now you're having a conversation that's more interesting. So if this point, the most interesting point of conversation, point in the room is between you and this other person, then you don't want to allow someone to interrupt. So this is a thing that people do, is they're in the middle of a conversation. Someone walks up that's maybe more interesting to you, and you go, "Oh, hey," and then you just abandon this conversation, right? Which leaves the other person feeling
Abandon ship.
right, awkward, and also it leaves them with a bad memory of the interaction between the two of you. If you can have a rule of thumb that you don't allow the conversation between you and someone to be interrupted. So in other words, you give someone a gesture, and like, "Hold on, well, I'd like to talk to you," but you continue the conversation and you make the other person feel important, then that actually signals something good to the person you're talking to, but also the person that you put on hold for a little while, because it shows that you have enough respect to continue the conversation here. The exception to that is when there's a group and the conversation is flowing. You don't have to put your hand to anyone else. You can allow the conversation to flow. Or if you're in a group and someone new walks into the group, it is perfectly acceptable for you to stop the conversation and welcome the new person in, introduce them to the group, and then continue the conversation.
All right, so you're at a party and you're talking to someone intently. Can you go all night with that, or is that rude, or do you got to break it up at one point, huh?
I think it's perfectly acceptable to have a conversation with one person all night if that's your intention. So you have to know your intention going in.
What if it's your engagement party and your fiance's on the other side of the room?
Right. Then it's more appropriate, obviously, for you to keep the conversation short and sweet and continue to
Very
flow
short and
around,
sweet.
right?
Okay.
So you have to establish what your purpose is. Not everybody goes into social interactions with the same intent. Sometimes someone is looking for one person and just to spend time in a group, right? And so they just want to have that one conversation, and then their body language kind of shows that, right? Other people are there to meet new people or to mingle, and so your body language can show that. And that brings us to body language, because there's something that we missed talking about on the flirting one, and that is the avoiding trapping someone. So using your body to sort of trap someone into a corner and then kind of holding them hostage with conversation is it can be intimidating for a woman, but it also can feel like it can make the other person feel like, how do I escape this situation?
So how do you try, like you get them in a corner and you hold both tables or something?
You could do it that way, or just noticing someone sitting and you're kind of using your body to block them off from the rest of the room as you a lot of times you actually assume interest. And that's another error, is assuming interest, like actually going on and on about, surely you know someone in your life who will go on and on about a topic or a story that really no one cares about, but they're talking for hours on end if you let them.
Thank you for saying that.
So if you have something you want to talk about, one way to do it is to introduce what we call a story gap. So a story gap is basically a teaser, right? It doesn't give them the punchline, but it allows them to develop interest in what you have to say so that they're actually leaning in. And you can gauge interest whether they're leaning in. I'll use my clients. My client is actually launching a YouTube channel called Cajun Crime Queen, okay? And so if she's in conversation and someone just meets her, she could say, "Oh yeah, Wednesday I'm starting a new YouTube channel and it's called Cajun Crime Queen," and she could launch into it. Someone she's talking to may not actually be into true crime. Serial killers might be of zero interest. But if she leads with her story, which is to say, "Oh yeah, I started a channel and it all started when I actually had a run-in with a pretty famous serial killer years back. I told him where I lived, I told him where I worked, what days I worked, I gave him all my personal information because I didn't know that he was a serial killer." It ended up being Derek Todd Lee. That is a story gap that leaves someone going, "Who did you meet? Why did you tell him where you live?" Right? And so that can actually allow someone who's not even into true crime to lean in and go, "Tell me more. Like, what is it about this?"
The other person ought to lean in and go, "I am a serial killer."
Right? Talk about a story gap. Right? So
Sorry, I'm just having too much fun with this.
I love it. And that's good. So that's what we're talking about is like creating that fun vibe. So rather than trapping, you want to lean. Like leaning is a good thing to do. So if you lean against a bar or lean against a wall, what naturally ends up happening is that two other people in the room, you look like the center point of the conversation. You look more confident, you look more expanded. And so we've talked about confidence and expansion a lot. And if you are someone who shows up in social interactions with a bit of anxiety, another social error is putting your hands in your pockets. Like, it actually shows that it conveys that maybe you're untrustworthy. It makes people nervous because you look nervous, right? And this is actually even better. Like, it's better to cross your arms, and that's not even ideal, than to put your hands in your pocket. So leaning and opening up, if you can remember nothing else and you have a problem with social interactions, open and expand. Just think open and expand. So everything we have is open and expansive rather than putting your, exactly.
Blow it up.
That's right. And rather than putting your hands in your pocket, you're actually using your hands with two different types of gestures, which we talked about. The first one is precise gesturing. So that means I'm underscoring the words that I'm speaking. So there was a huge fish, right? Or, I just have this small idea, right? Or using the little pointer, because we know people don't like being pointed at, like pointing to underscore what you're talking about. So these are precise gestures. And the other is expansive gestures that show confidence, that give generosity to the people that you're talking to, okay, rather than putting your. So the other thing is that we want to make sure that, speaking of generosity, that we're not interpreting negative intent when someone is talking, right? So someone says something to us, maybe we have a little bit of a trigger there. It's a little bit of an emotional, what do you mean by that, right? And so in conversation, even if you're wrong, assuming generosity, assuming good intent for someone actually diffuses a social situation that could be quite combative, right? And kind of it makes it so that there's actually a video out there of, I don't know if you've seen this, of Tom Cruise being squirted in the eye with a reporter squirted him with a pen or something. And rather than getting explosive and reacting, he leans in and he goes, hey, why did you do that? Right? So he actually goes in to find out, like to question this person. Instead of dehumanizing him and going after him, he's like, hey, why did you do that? Touches him. Now that shows a lot of charisma. It takes the power back, the confidence back, and it helps the person to actually take control of the situation and diffuse things.
In my world, when a woman says, what do you mean by that? You're going, red flag?
Right. Right.
It was a simple question.
Yes.
But anyway, that's good stuff.
It is. It's really good stuff. So just remember that levity, fun, banter, jokes, and you don't have to be competitive in your bantering. That's the other thing, as someone who has to always win at the bantering.
Take the shot and laugh if you fail.
Yes.
Just take the shot.
That's it. That's it. And
have fun with it.
Have fun with it.
All right. Thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome.
What's next week? I can't wait.
I don't even know yet.
All right. All right. We'll see you again next week. I can't wait.